FM.
Welcome to another episode of Disability Life. I'm joined, well, I'm looking at on the left side of the screen, but when you watch it, it might be on the right side of the screen, so who knows where it will land. But I'm here with Brooke Millhouse. Welcome on, Brooke.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to diving into this chat. It'll be good fun.
Yeah, we should just say that you already did an episode with me, January. I forgot when it was. Was it last year? I can't remember.
I think it was January this year. It was quite
Yes.
early on in the year. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've been asleep since then, and I've forgotten all kind of things. So yeah, you're a podcaster and also an adaptive CrossFit athlete, which is a very nice
hmm
combination.
Yeah. I love doing my podcast. It's great, but I also really love CrossFit. It's another really important part of my life, and like I don't know where I'd be without fitness, to be honest. Like it's one of my favorite things to do. So
And my favorite machine at the gym is the vending machine, but that's another story. Um, so we should So I've been doing a bit of research and I've not found anything about your disability. What exactly is your disability?
So I am limb different. So I was born without my right hand. And I have my elbow, but I don't have too much past that. And like some people call it limb different. Some people will say they're born without a hand or an arm. I just say that I'm Brooke and like I don't have a hand, and that's like the best way to describe it for me. But if we're getting like super technical about it, I have a limb difference, and that's what it is.
Yeah, that's very, very minor um disability really.
I think it's quite interesting, though, the idea that disability has hierarchy because whilst our disabilities are different, they will affect us in different ways. So, for example, like I struggle with like having things on my right hand side, and whilst like on the surface it just seems like I don't have a hand, there's actually quite a lot of other implications that causes. So the idea that we have like minor or major disabilities is really interesting because actually disability affects everybody completely differently, and what might seem like on the surface not like a big deal actually below the surface can be quite a big deal. Like for example, I have really bad back problems because I overcompensate on one side, and I have one side that's a lot more dominant than the other, and there are a lot of other complications. So actually the idea of like having a minor disability doesn't really exist. It's something that I think people like to think, oh, you know, you're not that disabled, and it's like, well, actually, disability affects everybody differently, and the way that we talk about disability and how it affects us individually is different to how somebody else is going to talk about their disability. So, yeah, I mean, I'm still disabled, and like I'm disabled by society, and the way that I'm viewed is very much I'm a disabled woman. So, yeah, disability is a massive part of my life.
And is it uh that kind of thing or am I thinking of something else? The limb difference. Um because I saw someone on Bake Off a few years ago
hmm
with it was just like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That yours or
No, so I have my elbow and then I don't have too much after that.
oh, I
So
see.
like
So like
I'm
an upper
literally
T
missing
type
like
thing.
my whole right forearm, like it doesn't
Okay,
exist.
got you,
Yeah.
got you. Um, and so that was from birth,
It's from birth, yeah.
got you. Well, could the growing up stages, how was that? I mean, you must have had obstacles, schools.
I think I don't know a disabled person who hasn't had like some form of issues within the scholastic system, that everybody has some form of issues, whether it be accessibility issues or societal issues, or like it's when you're growing who you are as a person and you're developing who you are, and at that point in time like everything's raging, isn't it? Like hormones, people are changing, you're changing, And like to be disabled on top of that adds an extra layer. And I think it can be quite an uncomfortable experience because you're acutely aware that you're different, especially at a time when you don't necessarily want to be different. Everybody wants to fit in, and everybody feels like they're gawky and awkward and weird. Um, but school for me wasn't so bad. Like I didn't have an awful time at school. I went to quite a nice school. Actually, I say I went to a really nice school. I was very, very fortunate to go to the school that I went to, and because of that, I think there were mechanisms put in place. So it was made sure that I wasn't felt left out, and it wasn't felt like anything that I asked for was too much. So, in saying that, really interestingly, I wasn't necessarily privy to those conversations. It was very much like my parents probably had those conversations with the school and teachers, and it was a closed door conversation that I didn't have any access to. And actually, at that age, I don't think I would have been able to verbalize exactly what I needed and what would have made me feel comfortable because I wanted to fit in like everybody else. So yeah, like I had quite a good time during the school years and childhood, and I think what's really, really interesting is from doing my podcast and speaking to lots of different disabled people is that particularly when you're born disabled, the first kind of chunk of your life, so like the first part where you're younger, everybody really wants you to succeed,
Yeah.
and everybody wants the disabled child to do well, and you're given, so much support is thrown at you and your family, and everybody wants you to succeed. And then there maybe comes a time where you're coming into your early teens where you're kind of now viewed a bit more as like a health and safety hazard, and we don't really know how to communicate with you because you're kind of growing up, so we can't like swaddle you, and we can't look after you like we did when you were younger. So it's very much like feel your own feet and find out where you are, but equally we can't help you too much because you're still growing, you're still trying to be who you are and develop who you are in yourself. And that stage is really awkward because, like, as I said, that's when like hormones are changing and you're changing, you're growing, you're trying to find out who you are, and like that experience, I think universally, I don't care who you are, if you're disabled or non-disabled, is awkward for everyone. But I think for me, I was so acutely aware that I was different, and I was kind of very much the idea, well, my arm is never going to grow back. Like I'm not going to have like a magical growth spurt where I'm suddenly going to wake up one morning and have a hand, or like slowly it's coming back over the case of 6 months. That's not going to happen. That's medically impossible. So I have to be okay with myself because I don't really have a choice not to be, because I'm, like I said, like my arm's not going to grow back. It's not a medical miracle. And I have to be able to stand up for myself and back myself, because ultimately, like I'm left with me for the rest of my life. And if I don't back myself, then how is anybody else going to be able to understand what I want and what I need, but also how they're going to be able to trust that my opinion on this is correct? And I think I had to really foster that at quite a young age. I think that maybe comes for people when they're like in their early 20s or like mid to late 20s. I think it came for me at quite a young age because I knew that I had to be able to advocate for myself, because I was the only person that, like in my school at the time, I was the only disabled person in my school. Or if there were people who were disabled, it was very much like a hidden disability or a disability that you couldn't see to the naked eye. And I'm not talking about neurodiversity because I think that's a completely different kettle of fish. But I was very much the only like physically disabled person in my school, so I had to really be able to A, stand my own ground, and B, make sure that I was okay with myself, because I did look completely different to everybody else, and that's okay, but you have to really build your sense of self quite quickly and be quite rock solid in your foundation. And that's not an easy process for anyone. So I had a good time, but it was a lot. It was a lot.
And just sort of in between that conversation, I was thinking, have you ever been given the opportunity by doctors or whoever, of having some sort of robotic part of it? So,
Yeah. Yeah, so I was under a limb clinic for a really long time. Like, well, I say a really long time, it wasn't very long at all. I stopped wearing prosthetics when I was about 5,
okay,
um, because they just weren't for me. Like, it wasn't for me. They weren't comfortable. I was I was the first like child in the UK to get a robotic hand. So like when robotics first came into play with prosthetics, I was like one of the first kids in the UK to get this, and pretty much straight away I was like, this is not for me. Obviously, I was 5, I didn't have the language that I have now, but I knew that it felt really cumbersome. I knew it felt really heavy, and I also knew that it was fake. So I think in my head, I was like, it isn't a part of me. Like that part of me doesn't exist. So why do I need to replace it? And obviously, again, like I didn't have the language, but I knew that it was fake, and I knew that it wasn't a part of me. Like I knew when I touched it, it wasn't my skin, and I knew that when I looked at it, it didn't look like the rest of my skin, and I didn't like that, and I didn't understand why I needed to have that to fit in. Like why did society accept me more all of a sudden when I had 2 hands, when actually it was really fake and really awkward for me to wear and fit in, and it just wasn't for me. So I stopped wearing them at the age of 5, and to be honest, I haven't looked into getting another one.
So, I mean, technology has changed so much, especially in the last
Mm.
few years. Has a robotic arm not been discussed, or you've not thought about maybe getting one of those wearable things where it connects to the brain and it would just maybe move your hand or something? None of that.
No, like at this point in my life, like to have that would, don't get me wrong, I think it would be incredible to experience, but it's not something that I'm looking for, and it would be, it'd be an amazing thing to try, but equally I don't need it in my life to succeed. I don't need it in my life to fit in, and if, I feel like if it says a lot more about other people that they're not willing to accept you as you are than if I suddenly had like a robotic hand, or like I call them fake hands. If I suddenly had a fake hand and I was suddenly accepted more, like, well, that says so much more about you than it does about me. So it's not something that I've really looked into because I just don't feel like I'm missing out.
Fair enough. And so you've established yourself as a disability activist, and now a professional speaker as well, I've noticed. So how did you get into those? Did you go to uni, do some sort of courses and major courses, or how did you get into those sort of roles?
I stumbled into them. Like I very much stumbled into this world. Like I went to uni, I did history of art at uni, which is absolutely not related to what I do now. Like it's got absolutely nothing to do with what I do now. Um, and I always knew that I wanted to have conversations surrounding disability. I just didn't really know like what medium that would be in. And I always knew that I was quite good at chatting to people. I knew that I could have a good conversation, and actually I really enjoyed having good conversations with people, and I'm an auditory learner, so for me visuals don't really do too much. Like I can look at them, but I don't really take a lot of information in from that. But if I hear it and if I speak it and if I say it, I learn it a lot quicker. So I was really annoying to be around when I was revising for exams because I'd have to speak my notes to myself. But I really like talking to people and getting to know them. And I think there's so much to be learned in rich conversation, and you can almost learn something new from every conversation you have. So I kind of came up with this idea that I really wanted to be chatting to other disabled people and about their experiences and about their life, and how their disability like plays out in their life. Is it a big thing? Is it a small thing? Has it impacted their work life? Has it impacted their childhood? Like, or if you acquired your disability, like what was that process like? What was it like to suddenly have your identity completely changed? Because, acquiring a disability is so completely different to being born with a disability. So I just always wanted to have those types of conversations, and I just didn't really know where to start. And I think it got to the point where I was like, okay, I've got this idea and I need to just do something with it. And so I had a conversation with my friend Al, who's like this incredible, she is one of the best like disability advocate people I know. Like she's not big on social media, like she's got hundreds of thousands of followers, but she works really, really close to the ground with disability sports, and she's a great human. We were having a conversation about both being disabled girls because I met her when we worked together in America. And we were having this conversation about how we're both disabled girls and how life treats us and how we view our disabilities and how there are so many funny things that happen. And I realized I was kind of good at that kind of conversation, and it was fun. It was really, really fun. And so I decided that I'd just create a podcast, which sounds super flippant, like, oh, I'm just going to create a podcast. But it was very much like, I want to have these chats. I want to talk to people. why can't I get it done? And I didn't see the conversations happening. You know, there were no conversations between just two disabled people having chats about their disabled life, and it wasn't like, oh, I'm super inspirational because I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and I've got no hands and I've got no feet, and so I'm an incredible human being. And don't get me wrong, that's a bloody amazing feat, and I'm so happy for you if that's what you've done, and I think it's incredible. But there's also that the media in the UK in particular really likes to play in between, like, you're the super inspirational person if you're disabled, but then equally like you're a benefit scrounger. And it can be like on two opposite pages of a newspaper. You can, you can see it. And actually there was nothing in the in between. And I was like, well, I've got this idea. I want to start talking to disabled people. Why don't I just do it? And that's kind of how I fell into being a podcast host. And because of that, and because I talk about disability, I then got approached to speak about what I was talking about. And that's kind of how I fell into it. So it was very much a case of like, I've got an idea, okay, I need to execute the idea. And then because I have executed it, like other things are coming my way because of it, which like I'm really, really fortunate that it's happened the way it has, because I definitely didn't plan it that way.
Well, it's a similar thing for me because I just Instagrammed a load of different people from all different sort of backgrounds and all different kind of
Mm.
passports. I never expected that many replies to come back. I was like, blimey, I've set myself for four here. So tell me, what were you doing what were you doing over at the States? You mentioned America halfway through that. What were you doing there?
Yeah. So I did like Camp America for 3 summers, and it was like the most formative, best experience I've ever had in my life. I worked at the same camp for 3 years. I had really great friendship base there. Like it was honestly like the best 3 years of my life, in terms of like what I was doing at that point in my life. The summers I would really look forward to, and I got to have like the perfect job. I got to lifeguard on a lake, and I get to go partying at night with my friends, and it was just three of like the most perfect summers that you could ever imagine at that age. Like super carefree. We weren't making crazy money, but like we had enough to survive, and we always had enough to go for a drink. And like it was such a fun time. And I look back with like some of my favorite memories during that period of time. It was just incredible. Yeah, it was so good.
It sounds like heaven.
It was a really brilliant. I worked at a really brilliant camp, and the owners of the camp were super understanding and really understood that the job was intense, but you could have fun and you could blow off steam. And like the culture of that camp was brilliant. It was a really incredible place to work, and I'm really lucky with the friendships that I found there. Like my best friends came from that place, and like the first time I properly fell in love was in that place, and it was just like the most incredible 3 summers that I could have ever have asked for. And like every time I look back at it, I can't help but like smile from ear to ear because it was just so great.
And and so when did you first start your podcast?
So I launched the first episode in April of 2021. No, 2021, 2022. 2022, I think it was. Yeah, first like April the 27th, 2022. That's when I
Quite
first
quite
launched it.
specific.
Yeah, I'm really good at like remembering key dates in in my life. Like there are certain dates that I will always remember, and that's like one of them. 27th of April 2022 is when the first episode of Disabled and Proud aired. And it was a really scary moment for me because I didn't, I wasn't like a I have no journalistic background. I didn't study this. Like I literally just picked like a handful of people that I knew that were friends that I knew wouldn't say no. And I was like, please have a conversation with me about disability. And they all said yes. And then I put it out to the world, and yeah, it was scary and amazing and one of the best things I've ever done. Yeah.
I mean, it grew ever since.
Yeah, and it's been growing ever since. Like today I launched the 96th episode, I think it is. Which is wild. Like we're coming up to the one big 100, and I've got a live podcast at NADEX this year as well. So like loads of really exciting things have happened because of it. And yeah, it's like my firstborn child. I just want to watch it grow and nurture it as much as I can.
And by today, you mean Wednesday, the 30th of March, because obviously this will come out for a while. So just let people know
Mm-hmm.
it's 30th of March and not today, whenever that is. So that's um and and so what was that first podcast? Like, who was it with? Was it just with one of your friends and it just had the idea? Did it last for long or were you just finding your way through what the podcast would eventually be talking about, your main questions? Was it just a startup one and you just thought, oh, I can do more questions, I can think about this, I can think about that, I could ask them more questions, all that?
Mhm. I had the first idea, I want to say like 2021. And I worked in like health and social care during the pandemic. So as much as I would have loved to have done something at that point in time, I couldn't. I was probably quite burnt out, to be honest. And like I had this idea in the back of my mind that I really wanted to do it, but I didn't have the energy or the time or the effort to put into the idea that I really wanted to make it. And so actually I kind of sat on the idea for about a year, and because I was able to sit on it and not like I would have loved to have done it sooner, but actually like globally the world was not in a place where that was available to me because I was working like all the time. I think I had maybe 4 days off between the years of 2020 and 2021. It was really intense. So during that time, in the evenings, I would kind of sit and I'd like, okay, who would be like the ideal guests? And I'd write out like 10 of my ideal guests. And then I would think about the conversations that I wanted to have and what questions were really important to me. And actually, like, what did I want to hear and what did I want to talk about? And actually, what what would have benefited the younger version of me, like hearing two disabled people talk, what would have benefited that version of Brooke? What would she have wanted to know about what it's like growing up with a disability or like even acquiring a disability, like what that experience is like? And so whilst even though I sat on it for a year, I managed to really flesh the idea out. So like I had the questions down, I knew who I wanted to speak to, I knew like the color scheme that I was going for. I knew all of the details and like fine the minutia, like I knew it all. And then it just came around to actually, okay, cool, I've got this idea. I've kind of fleshed it all out to the point where I can't flesh it out anymore. I just have to go and do it. And so that's what I did. And yeah, it's been long. I'm not going to say that it's like been easy because it definitely hasn't. And there's been times where I've thought like, oh, I don't want to do it anymore. But actually, I've never really felt like I've never wanted to do it anymore. It's been more like, oh, I just want this all to be worth it in the end. And actually, I can honestly look back and say there's a body of work that I'm really proud of, and that I hope at some point has helped someone else. So yeah, like
Mm,
sometimes sitting on an idea is a good thing.
yeah. And how did you come up with the name? Because I was thinking of a name from my last two podcast ones, so I'm thinking, what is a good name for a podcast? And it took me ages to find out a name in the end. So it was always quite easy for you to come up with, oh, I'm civil and I'm proud of it.
It literally like it came to me like that. Like the name for me was easy. It wasn't like because I knew what I wanted to talk about. And I knew what the message would be. Like you can be proud of your disability, and actually, it made sense. You can't mistake disabled and proud for anything else, and that's very much the message that I want to get across. Is that actually, do you know what? Sometimes disability is absolutely awful. Sometimes it's really hard and it can be really crappy, but actually you can still be really freaking proud of yourself and be really proud of the fact that you're disabled and you're still like absolutely smashing life. Like you can't mistake it for anything else. So it was always going to be disabled and proud.
Well, that's a very good title because I struggled with my last two and I managed to nail it. I've just I've just winged it and just named it after the radio show that I was doing, so it was pretty easy in the end. Um, and with who would be your ideal celebrity guest who's had a disability that you would like to get on? Have you had
Billy
any?
Connolly. I've said this really recently. I really want to interview. I'd absolutely die to have a conversation with Billy Connolly for like so many reasons. He's so funny. and like, but I'd also love to know about how his life has changed since he's had Parkinson's. I'd love to know what that experience was like, and particularly because he was so in the public eye and he's so funny, and I'm sure that he'd have like some incredible tales. Like he's the kind of like your perfect dinner party guest, and to be able to interview him, I think would be like absolutely incredible. I would honestly, I'd give my other hand for it. Like,
Oh. Um, and so, but before the podcast and 2022, we mentioned it just before we came on to film that you did CrossFit and you've done it 4 years. Um,
mhm.
you start just before COVID, then.
So I actually started in the in between of COVID.
Oh, okay.
So I started like the back end of 2021. So like in September, I'll have been doing CrossFit for 4 years. Yeah, 2021, 2022, 23, 24. Yeah, I'll have been doing it for 4 years. And it's been like one of my favorite things that I've ever dived into, but that doesn't mean to say that it hasn't been difficult, and like not difficult in terms of like, oh, it's like the movements are hard and like I've got to be really strong. It's actually sometimes with sports, even in disability sports, even sports that are, adaptive, there's still politics, and it's still hard to like, it's very, very, very difficult to get a disability sport that is going to fit you and your disability exactly to a T. Like that kind of notion, and in the nicest way possible, doesn't exist. Like there are still things that I have to adapt, and I'm, in the right category. So that can be hard. But actually I wouldn't have it any other way. I absolutely love CrossFit. It's one of my favorite things.
And how did you get into CrossFit?
I literally just turned up to my local CrossFit box.
Okay.
Like super simple, booked onto a class, had watched a couple of CrossFit videos, followed a woman who looked like me with a similar disability, and she was doing adaptive CrossFit. And I thought, well, if she can do it, I can do it. Why not go and give it a go? You might hate it, but you might love it. And if you love it, it'll be a good thing to do.
And do you do competitions with it, or is it just
Yeah, so I do like local competitions,
okay?
and they're always really fun. I've done the last year the UK had its first ever adaptive competition, and I came first in my division, which was super fun. And that was where my competitive side really came out. But in terms of like the global CrossFit competition, so like there's the Open at the minute, it's called the CrossFit Open. This year I'm not competing in it because I've got soft tissue damage in my foot, which is causing me a lot of grief. So it was better that I sat the year out and was able to have fun with my friends at local competitions than really pushing myself for this year's Open, and actually it causing a lot more bad than good for me. So
Yeah, because I had Tom Manolis, or I can't pronounce his surname very well, that I had him on for the third episode, I think,
mhm.
or fourth episode, I can't remember. One of the episodes, all of the early ones of this podcast, and he's cerebral palsy, also, so he's in the US and he does CrossFit. Well, this is
Mhm.
it's quite good. And it was telling me all those different classifications. And I'm like, blimey, there's so many. Even though,
Yeah.
it's a brand new thing, like CrossFit is now one of the biggest exercise competitions ever. So it's incredible.
Mhm.
And it's nice to see many things happen. So how did you get into it? Because I looked into the company that you're with that does professional speaking and activist. Did you approach them or did they approach you, or how did that sort of combination come together?
Yeah, I messaged them. I really like who they had on their books, and I was like, oh, like I'm a trained professional speaker, like I know what I'm talking about, and it would be just great to feature on your website. And to be fair to them, they got back to me pretty quickly and were like, yeah, we'd absolutely love to work with you. Like we watched your work, we know what you do. It's great what you do. So yeah, and it's been a really nice relationship so far. So it's been good.
And do you go into schools? Do you go into work environments? What exactly is it that you speak at?
Yeah, so I've got a big event next week actually. It's like a business event about inclusivity. I speak a lot about inclusivity and about like being proud of who you are and that type of vibe, being able to be proud of like who you are and what you are and how that's really important. So I go anywhere from schools to like corporate events to like you know, smaller like in-house sessions. I do quite a lot of smaller in-house work settings, so that's quite fun. They're always nice. So yeah, like it's a real mixture. It's a real mixed bag, but everybody always tells me that it was good, so I'll take that as the compliment.
Well, they're not going to say no to your face, are they? So
Exactly.
it's quite awkward if they did, to be honest. Yeah. And last few questions now. Um, I always say this at the end. Your last question was always, "Are you disabled and are you proud?" My last question, as always has been for this one, is there any advice or any tips for anyone who has the same disability as you or similar condition? What would you like to say to them?
I asked that question as well in my podcast, and I think what I would say is embrace who you are. Like it can be really awkward and it can be really clumsy and sometimes it doesn't feel good and you're battling with a lot of internalized ableism. But really like take time to embrace who you are and get to know yourself and actually really be proud of what it is that you can do in this world. Like be proud of what you can achieve. And like that might be something like pouring yourself a cup of tea. That is an absolute win. Like that's such a win. Being able to do that is incredible. And that sounds really flippant, but it's not, because if you can celebrate the little things when bigger things happen, then it will feel just as good. So yeah, just really fully embrace yourself. And I've heard a lot of answers to that questions over the 2 years, and they're all very similar. And I think the idea of embracing yourself as young as you can is the best. So yeah, that would definitely be my question.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I'm glad we finally managed to get on this one. And yeah, I can't wait to see your 100th episode and be like all capital letters. 100th episode, how did we get this far? Onto to the text. So I can't wait for that. But
Yeah.
thank you very much for
Oh,
one book.
thank you so much for having me. It's been really lovely, and I hope you have a really great rest of your day.
Voice. Let's go. Voice FM.